It's been a year since the October 7th Hamas attack triggering the Gaza war, and we're here in Israel. We're in Tel Aviv with Gideon Levy. He's one of Israel's best-known journalists. He's an unflinching critic of the Israeli state, especially on the Palestinian question. He's the author of Twilight Zone, Life and Death Under the Israeli Occupation and the Punishment of Gaza. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for coming.
Gideon Levy, in your home here in Tel Aviv. Now, this is a time of war, and normally in a time of war, there's this sort of concept of national unity. I mean, it's hard enough to be critical of the government, especially on the Palestinian question at any time. But now, in this time, you remain as fiercely critical as ever. In fact, one of your recent pieces in the newspaper Haaretz, which is a leading Israeli paper, is titled, "Israeli Society Has Truly Fallen to Cruelty, Violence and Apathy. Just look at us." Firstly, I'd like to understand from you why you feel that, but also to take that position now.
If not now, when? I mean, those who say, be silent, we are shooting. We had someone who once wrote an article, be silent, shut up, we are shooting. No, this was in one of the former wars.
Right.
When we are shooting, that's the time to raise your voice. Later on, it's too late. I can assure you that after this war will be over one day, many critics will show up. But now it's the time when we see the photos and the images from Gaza, which are not shown here, by the way. When we hear about the destruction, about over 40,000 people massacred, about 17,000 children killed, how can you silence? How can you keep silent?
Right. So you're saying, if not now, when?
Exactly.
But when you look at what is happening in Gaza, and of course that's terrible, the argument that the unprecedented response, in a sense, of the Israeli government, the Israeli military, is to the unprecedented nature of what happened on October 7th, which is also, of course, terrible, the killing of children and families and all of that. And so that has triggered this kind of very strong reaction. To that, you would say what?
I'll be very clear about it. What happened on the 7th of October was horrible. Nothing of what happened on the 7th of October justifies what Israel had done ever since then.
Right.
Yes, Israel had the right to retaliate, had the right to protect itself, had the right to punish those who are responsible. But this mass killing of innocent people in Gaza and the mass destruction of Gaza cannot be justified by anything. And Israelis, most of them, unfortunately, all of them, think that the 7th of October gives us the freedom to go wild. No, right. There are limits also to the retaliation. Big limits, that Israel is far from those limits.
To the argument that Israel makes frequently, that the civilian death count is because Hamas is using human shields and they're fighting from civilian areas. You would say what?
Propaganda has no limits. We are sitting now in a neighborhood in Tel Aviv. In a distance of 500 meters from here, there are 3 very secret military facilities or security facilities. 500 meters from here. So if my house will be bombed, we will blame Israeli army because it's not the army, other agencies, because they are located within. Where exactly can Hamas locate itself? You know the Gaza Strip, how narrow it is. There is no place where there are no people living. So this is demagogia. This has nothing to do. You have your limits. The limits of the international law, limits of morality, limits of some kind of manners. And Israel lost.
So when you say that most people, seem to be on board, most people in Israeli society seem to be on board with this free-for-all, that it's not just Hamas, it's free-for-all on all Gazans. Are you saying that voices like yours now have become a minority? Are you an island?
First of all, we were always a minority. But now
is it even more of a...
Now you can't even call it a minority, because when you speak about voices in plural, I start to think, who else? I mean, I was never so lonely like in this war. Lonely in terms of my position. Never.
Never before.
Never before was it that Israel is speaking only in one voice and is not ready to hear any alternative voice. Nothing.
Do you face threats? Do you face
Yes, but less
hostility?
than before. Less than before.
Less than before?
Yeah, that's interesting. In 2014, I had bodyguards.
2004, this is during the 2014 Israel-Gaza war.
Exactly. My newspaper rented me bodyguards. I couldn't go out to the streets.
Haaretz.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how to explain it, but my feeling is that everything goes now to the social media and I'm less present there.
I see.
So, unless I did something wrong, I don't know why.
You had bodyguards at that time. Why?
Because people attacked me a few times in the streets. Not shooting, but violence.
They attacked you.
Absolutely. 3 or 4 times, either by talkings and few times also. One time I ran away on my bicycle, otherwise they would really lynch me. There were very unpleasant scenes there. Because I wrote then a very provocative article about the Israeli pilots.
Right. But, okay, so you may not get actual physical threats now, but do you get
Look, it's
abused? Do you get...
pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, come with me to the street and you'll see.
I see.
I mean, I'm
What-
jogging in the morning in the park, and there's a woman that every morning at 6 o'clock, when she sees me, she screams, "Traitor! Traitor!" I can't help it.
Power for the cause. But is there an attempt, as there are in other sort of flawed democracies around the world, by the government to stifle dissenting voices by putting pressure on public institutions, media, and so on? I mean, it's one thing to be critical of people like you, but is that a bridge that has been crossed in Israel, or is there still a relative degree of freedom of speech, even at a time like this?
There is a relative freedom of speech, and I don't take it for granted. Haaretz is obviously the island or the lighthouse,
Yes.
and they don't touch Haaretz.
They don't.
They don't touch us. They never did. They can't do anything. They are trying to put pressure on TV, on radio, on other outlets, not on Haaretz. But I must tell you, they don't need to do it because the journalists are having their own self-censorship. They don't need open TV, and you will understand that you don't need any pressure in order to make the Israeli TV look like a Russian propaganda TV.
Without having to necessarily turn the
Nothing,
screws.
only for commercial reasons. Only to please the viewers and not to bother that they know the viewers don't want to see anything about Gaza. They know they don't want to hear about the suffer of the people of Gaza. And they support them, they please them, they obey them, and they don't show them anything. An average Israeli saw much less from the killing and the destruction of Gaza than an average Indian. I can assure you this.
Really?
Absolutely. You will see nothing on TV. You will see, a clip of 30 seconds.
That's it.
A few weeks ago, Israel bombed the shelter, which was a school, which was shelter.
Yes.
And over 100 people were killed. You know that the main newspapers in Israel didn't even mention it. I mean, you don't need even to know it. So much they are concerned about pleasing their readers and their viewers.
What is, you think, triggered? I mean, I know there's a long history to where Israel is at this point, and perhaps we don't have the time for all of it, but what do you think has led to this dramatic, as you describe it, change, where as you said, that Israel has truly fallen into cruelty, violence, and apathy?
It was all there before. Now all the masks are torn. Now the Israelis feel that after the 7th of October, we don't even have to apologize. We don't even have to pay lip service.
Right.
We can say clearly the Palestinians are not equal human beings like us. Look at the 7th of October and draw the conclusions that we claim for years. They are not human beings like us. We are moral and they are the barbaric Palestinians. That's the way of thinking.
So it was building up, you said, and this was the trigger. But was it also the there's been, even before October 7th, this seemingly rightward shift in Israeli society, right? Where you now have,
For a long time.
and then you also have this government.
Absolutely. But this government's 20 years almost, yeah.
Right.
I mean, Netanyahu, not the government, but Netanyahu. It is an ongoing process, but in the 7th of October, it got some momentum which it never had before. And the problem is that even people who were in the peace camp, in the left, even they converted and became nationalistic and militaristic and hating the Palestinians like never before. That's the main shift.
So so you're saying that even within the sort of left liberal,
I know about my old friends. I lost friends because people say, no, after the 7th of October, don't tell us about the Palestinian sacrifice or the Palestinians suffer. We don't want to hear it. It doesn't interest. They deserve it. They all deserve it.
while in earlier wars, Gideon Levy, was there a point that people from this group, people from the left or the liberal space, would come out and protest against the war?
In 82, much before you were born, there was a message.
I was born much before 82. Thank you, though. I'll take that as a compliment, but I'm much older than I look. But anyway.
That's also a compliment.
Yes, I'm taking that as a compliment.
In 82, there was a massacre in Lebanon of two Palestinian refugee camps, Sabra and Shatila. Mm-hmm. A horrible massacre made by the Christians in Lebanon, not by Israelis, but under the supervision of Israel. On the same night after this massacre, there were 400,000 protesters in the streets of Tel Aviv. 82. Today, if the same thing happened, you can't get 400.
Right.
And that's the shift.
That's the shift. So what you see when you see the protests on the streets of Tel Aviv and elsewhere from outside the country,
it has nothing to do with it.
It's got nothing to do with the war.
No,
it's got nothing to do with the sort of atrocities of the war.
Exactly.
It's to do with bring back the hostages and perhaps anti-Netanyahu protests.
Exactly. I couldn't phrase it better. It has nothing to, and therefore you will never see me there. And you will never hear my support to them. Because they are protesting only against Netanyahu and in favor to bring back the hostages. Nothing else interests them. And I cannot live with a protest which is totally blind to the suffer of the other. Totally blind.
You know, there's this question of never again, which always comes up, that this was this Israeli concept that once we go through the Holocaust, we will never allow for that to happen again. And it seems to have at its heart a paradox, which I'd love for you to explain. That on one hand, the assumption is that a group, a society that goes through something like the Holocaust imbues in them an idea of empathy, that we will not ever be perpetrators of something like this. On the other hand, it triggers some kind of deep survival instinct that we will not ever face any kind of threat or pressure and we will go to any extreme. How do you, I don't even know if I'm paraphrasing this accurately, but how do you see this never again
I would say
idea?
That never again could have two meanings, and Israel took a third one. One meaning is never again, never would any people, treat another people like the Nazis treated the Jews. This should have been the main lesson.
Right.
Israel took it, not only that never again, never would they do it to us, but Israel took it one step forwards. After the Holocaust, we have the right to do whatever we want. After the Holocaust, nobody will tell us what to do. After the Holocaust, we can ignore international law and international institution. We can ignore morality and anything because we are the victims. We are the only victims in history, and therefore we have the right to do whatever we want. And that's a horrible lesson.
Right. So it should actually be never again for everyone.
Exactly.
Which is, you're saying that Israel is not following that principle. But what would you say, Gideon Levy, to the idea that Hamas does pose an existential threat to Israel and that they are also very much part of the problem, that you can have Palestinian resistance, you can have a Palestinian opposition to what's going on, but Hamas is not the answer. They are, in a sense, almost the other side of this coin.
First of all, there were enough years before Hamas was established in which the Palestinians looked totally different, more moderate, more secular, less extreme, less fanatic. And Israel missed any opportunity to treat them equally. It never did. So don't come now and ask me Hamas, because there were enough years in which there was no Hamas and Israel did nothing. Secondly, I don't agree to the notion that Hamas is an existential threat to Israel. No, Israel is a regional superpower. Hamas is a very primitive, low-equipped organization. They can harm Israel. They can make Israel suffer. It's not existential threat. By all means, not.
Right.
And thirdly, we never tried an alternative way with them. If we believe that all our lives for generations, we will only live on sword, on our military force, then it will become an existential threat.
Right.
The day that Israel will realize that not everything can be solved by force, and there are alternative ways, which Israel hardly tried. But I believe that even Hamas could have been a different organization if Israel would have treated the Palestinians as equals.
Okay, but even if one concedes your point that the history of the whole Palestinian movement or resistance could have been different, now that you have this present reality of Hamas as almost the sole voice, it would seem, of the Palestinian people, how much of that is a challenge? I mean, both for the overall peace process, but also for the Palestinians themselves.
It's a huge challenge, and I wish we would have been in different planes. And therefore, right now, I'm very pessimistic, and I don't know how we are getting out of this situation, because it is in both sides. The extremists are so strong in both sides, and you cannot overbridge. Something must happen in order to restart, to reset. Otherwise, we are stuck forever.
What could that be? Is there anything, let me put it a different way, is there anything that makes you optimistic? Is there anything that makes Gideon Levy, even at a time like this, optimistic?
For the short run, not at all. Not at all. My only hope is from the international community, and that's a very, very limited hope, because we know that the international community until now did nothing except of lip service, and doesn't seem to do something. All I ask is treat the second apartheid state exactly like you treated the first apartheid state.
South Africa.
Absolutely. And in South Africa, it was extremely efficient. If not the international pressure, apartheid is still there until this very moment. Same thing with the second apartheid state. But the problem is that the world changed, and Israel is still the darling of the West and darling of the United States.
But when you see the reaction in some of these countries, like the protests, especially in the United States, which is obviously the key player here, I think I actually saw you or read you saying somewhere that you found some hope in the fact that there are all these young people.
I was about to get to this.
Yes.
If there is a hope, it's not from the young generation in my country. It's from the young generation in the United States. They will be, those who are protesting now in Harvard and in Columbia are the next state secretary and presidents and defense secretary of the United States. And when they will be in power, it will take some decades. When they will be in power, I guess the policy of the United States will be different. And Israel without the United States is lost. I mean, let's face it, Israel cannot survive for one day without the support of the United States. And I'm just hoping that this support will continue, but will be conditioned. Until now, it's unconditioned. Just make it conditioned, not too much to expect. And yes, that's my only, I have no hope for Israelis, because they will not change by themselves. It will not happen. It will not happen. Israelis will not wake up one shiny day and say, oh, the occupation is not so nice, let's put an end to it. Oh, apartheid is not so beautiful, let's change it. This will never happen. It will happen only if they will be taken accountable by the international community and pay a price for the crimes.
Right. All right. Well, that's a sobering reflection, but it was always a pleasure to talk to you, Gideon Levy. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you for coming.